Paul, so what parts of the US culture can be most shocking to international colleagues coming to the US to do business?
I think there are several things. One is the scale, which drives everything about US business culture. By scale, I'm referring to the fact that is several pieces. One is that there's business everywhere in the US.
Yep.
And the example I'll give is if you fly across the US at night, you see lights everywhere except for the Rocky Mountains. Everywhere where you see lights, there's business. And you will see tens of thousands of lights. What that translates into is in most countries, whatever business you're in or industry you're in, you might have 100 competitors. You probably know most of them by name. Your kids might know each other, so you're very familiar with them. In the US, because of the scale, you might have 10,000 competitors. You probably know less than 1% of them by name. So it's very impersonal, and you really have to target where and for what you want to do business in the US.
Yeah.
What that means is you need to be aggressive, you need to be persistent, and you need to be focused. The aggression and the persistence are what I think make the US market from a business perspective different than most other business cultures. People from most other countries that come to the US to do business are initially taken aback by the aggressiveness of Americans in business. But that's just a fact of life, and aggressiveness and persistence are rewarded.
What do you mean by aggressive? Like, what are some actions that people in the US would do on a normal day that may be surprising to international colleagues?
Um, as far as trying to make contact with a potential business partner or a potential client,
Yeah.
in the US, contacting somebody over and over again in a very short period of time is an accepted way of doing business. In many other cultures, you first have to take the time to build eye to eye contact and trust, and then you talk about business. In the US, yes, relationships matter, but what matters the most is that people value what you're trying to do. The way you demonstrate your value is persistence, constantly knocking on somebody's door, making regular phone calls, following up, not assuming somebody's going to come back to you. You're the one that has to follow up with them. Um,
Absolutely, Paul. And I'll just build on that to say the concept of being like politely persistent, where you might send them an email, they didn't respond. Every 3 to 5 days, you're following up on that email until you hear a hard no. If they say no, leave me alone, I'm not interested, that's fine. You leave it alone. But if it's silent, I always tell people to assume the most respectable interpretation that they didn't see the email, or they saw it, while they were walking the dog or doing something on their phone, but they weren't able to respond. And then they got a bunch of other emails and they lost it. They could still be interested, until you get a clear response saying no. It's important to continue that follow up, right?
exactly. And the way scale, the volume of competitors, and the fact that there's business across the US, the way that scales plays into this is that whether you're trying to meet somebody in person or get them to respond to a phone call or an email, you're in line with other people. It's all a competition for mind share. So
Yeah.
you need to do something to distinguish yourself enough and in such a way that the person who's the receiver thinks, they're worth contacting, they're worth responding to. And if you don't do that, you'll be at the back of the line. And in the US, back of the line could mean you're behind 1,000 other people. In another country, it could mean you're behind 10 people. So that's the way the scale matters.